Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. Back on the show with me, as always, is Jamie Franks. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Well, let's see, I've been flying every night the last couple of weeks, and my days are all messed up. What's today? Taco Tuesday?
It is Taco Tuesday. It is.
Tuesday.
And instead, we had Italian for lunch. That's where the whippersnapper wanted to go, and that's where we ended up going. And what's funny is we went there last week. It wasn't good. I said, "Where do you want to go?" He said, "Gino's." And I was like, "It wasn't good last week." He was like, "I have faith," and faith didn't do it for the old lunchtime routine. So that's all right. We will cut that out of the rotation. But yeah, here we are, Tuesday, recording a little bit early this week because the rest of my week is kind of crazy. I fly out tomorrow down to Florida, New Smyrna Beach. I have a 2-day advanced pistol class at the SIG Academy, their branch down there with Viking Tactics again, and then head south to head south to Fort Lauderdale for the weekend for a family birthday type thing. My mother and my father are flying down, and my uncle who lives down there, it's his birthday. So it is going to be a busy week. And it's just like, when you have limited time, there's so much being packed in. Had to go to the massage place this morning to try and work out this pinched nerve that just happened to happen right before I have a 2-day pistol class and need both hands. And one of them is working only about 60%. So between that and Zoom calls and whatnot, it's the days have flown by already, which when I start to think about it, I think my email marketing guy said to me last week, he was like, I have to do these mailers every single day. And I am horribly reminded of what day it is every day. And, when he starts thinking back, like he was doing them in March, and now all of a sudden it's August. It's like, your post today, like, you blinked and all of a sudden, boom, child back in school, child getting a year older. It's insane.
Well, so yesterday in the United States Navy, we just released all the results for all the people who have been selected to promote to Chief Petty Officer this year. And okay. It seems like yesterday that like the year I got selected for Chief Petty Officer was the year my daughter started kindergarten. And it's like, boom, like that. I mean, the time really, goes by so fast. I'm not trying to sound like Grandpa Frank's over here, but the time goes by so quick that like that's still like such a like fresh, vivid memory in my mind. And then this morning I'm dropping my daughter off at middle school already, so
my God, I know. I mean, I have a niece that's in high school, which is just mind-boggling to me. And then my other one, she's going to middle school. Yeah. Your daughter is 12?
She will be.
She will be 12.
Yeah. Okay. In a couple months, she'll be 12. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think my niece is just turned 12. So probably same grade.
Yep.
I don't know. Like my mother's like, well, why don't you take your nieces to lunch? I'm like, they only hit me up when they need money or Legos. So
we'll start hitting you up then if Legos are on the table. But
right.
But yeah, go back to your kind of original point, like a saying that I just heard recently that was like mind blown. Like it's such a good it said if you want something done, give it to a busy person, which it seems counterintuitive, but that's dead on, because like busy people are the people that know how to get stuff done. Like, and then it always seems like when you ask like a lazy person to do something, even though they're not doing anything, there's always some BS reason why they still can't do this thing you're asking them to do. But, if you email a busy person, you'll get a response back, that day, or 15 minutes later, maybe you email a person that is doing nothing, and you'll either not get a response or it'll be like a month later or whatever,
Yeah.
So
And
if
I
you want
always,
something
I
done,
mean,
give it to a busy person.
yeah, and for me, it's like I always feel like I have not accomplished enough each day. Because I know that there's more to do. There's more tasks to do with everything that's going on the Clark Armory side, and then obviously everything that still needs to go on the ZERT side. Like, I need to make sure that they have marching orders for the rest of the week. Like, we got
Yep.
to get ZERT orders have to get out tomorrow. I've got some posts that need to make sure that they get scheduled. One of ZERT's affiliates is DMO Knives. We just had a new one that came on, Agalite. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's a plate carrier company. I don't know if you saw the post, but we have a couple of members that are like product testers for it,
Mhm.
and they reached out to me and they wanted me to carry their plate carriers and whatnot. And I basically told them, like, I'm not bringing any of that stuff in right now until there's much bigger demand.
Yeah.
But I would be happy to bring them on as an affiliate, and we can give a coupon code to all ZERT members.
Sure.
Obviously, it's one of the perks for being a member of ZERT, and they can go and buy the stuff on their website. One of the other affiliates that we have is, I think you probably know this company, DMO Knives. DMO Knives. Have you?
I'm actually not. I not through ZERT, but just like
Right.
I've seen their social media stuff.
Yeah.
And same with the Aglite.
Yeah.
I have seen them on social media, and I think did we see them at Shot as well?
I don't think we saw that. No. We saw a different company at Shot, which is a company that I've wanted to work with it for over a year now. A couple times I reached out to them. We just were never able to get it really going. And then this company came in, but that's okay.
Yeah.
There's some great knife companies out there. I mean, I love I think it's my Norseman and my Patriot knife that I got from Viking Tactics. But the DMO knives, I mean, I've known those guys since, gosh, 20. I don't remember when I first got introduced to them. Excuse me. But they had the breacher knife. They had the Chubb. I mean, but they are some monster knives. I should have grabbed mine right now, but been connected with them for a minute, and I saw them and I reached out to them, and it's actually a different owner, different team of owners. I believe it's a husband and wife that ended up buying it. But like, for a camp knife, I mean, I love this thing. It's got a big, thick spine. I got the I had the breacher, and then they make one that's a little bit bigger than the breacher, but you're talking a big, thick spine. It's a heavy knife, it's a full tang, but it's just a workhorse, man. Like, you want to baton that through wood, no problem. Like, you just keep bashing that thing and you're good to go. It actually they made one for me. So it's got the red ZERT handle. It's got the ZERT logo on it. It made its debut in some pictures last year at a camping trip. And
I remember that.
Yep. So, and then there's a couple members that ended up getting one, but we're going to be doing some stuff with them through probably the Clark Armory mailer. They actually have a sweepstakes that it's going to go out on today's post. So I love a good knife. I love a good fixed blade knife. So
yeah,
especially
I'm
as a tool.
Such a knife nerd, but it's like by accident. It was like I made a post about this on my social media like a couple years ago, I think, actually, and then all the roaches come out of the woodwork. But like I love knives. The knife space is kind of a weird space because just like anything, there's a full spectrum of, like, you've got complete junk on one end, and then you have like these extreme high end blades on the other. And it's like, I like what I like, and a lot of times I'm not even aware of what's good. Like a lot of people probably on social media are know half face blades.
Yep.
And Andy Arabito, he's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. And when he very first started half face blades, like, just because I was one of his friends, he's like, hey, like he did this original like first run of knives, just kind of like to get seed money, like to get his company going. He's a Navy SEAL. He's a Navy SEAL sniper. He was like a couple of really famous like pictures of like Navy SEALs doing combat stuff in Afghanistan. Like, he just by chance he was in some of those like pictures that are now like really famous images from the war in Afghanistan with Naval Special Warfare. But he's a Navy SEAL sniper combat veteran. He decided to get out of the Navy and start this knife company. He did this first run of knives, offered them to people he knew. just to kind of get some money going to get the company going. And so I got one of those very first knives just because he was my friend, and he's like, "Hey, you want one of these?" And I'm like, "Sure." And last year I sold that knife for $10,000 to a
Holy cow.
collector, and then now I'm almost wondering if I should have kept it. But
Probably. That's the dude we met at Shot, right?
yeah, yep, yeah, we spoke to him
Yeah.
for a minute at Shot, and then but then like maybe a year and a half or so, like after he got the company going, because those first knives he made them all the same, basically.
Right.
And then so after he got the company going, I asked him like, "Hey, can you make this, like make a knife like just for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So he made me a knife that's basically like a one-off. And just like a couple of weeks ago, somebody offered me $7,000 for that one.
Jesus.
But like, like my carry knife, I always like I've liked Emerson knives for a
Oh
really
yeah.
long time.
Yep.
And like I know, I mean, like I said, the knife space is weird. Like I've always liked pinch made knives, but then you go to like Blade Show and things like this, and there's people that are paying like all this money for all these custom knives that, like, when I look at them, I'm like, are you really sure that this knife is better than this other one? And
Yeah.
but anyway, but like because people know I'm like for lack of a better expression, like I'm a tactical guy or whatever. You can always use a good knife. Everybody can use a
Oh
good knife.
yeah,
I
of course.
recommend, like, I would recommend to anybody, man, woman, or child, like, carry a knife and a flashlight. As we're sitting here right now, I have a knife and a flashlight, on me. And so it's kind of difficult and tricky and murky to like give people guns and stuff as gifts, but you can always give somebody a
Oh,
knife as a gift. And
yep.
so, like, just a
And a
couple of years
flashlight.
ago, yeah, but just a couple of years ago, I realized, like, just kind of without realizing it, I suddenly realized that, like, I have like a million knives because people have given them to me over the years. And you go to SHOT Show and you meet somebody and they're like, "Here, take this," or but yeah, so I've got, and in fact, I have this little wound on my lip right now because this weekend when I was taking my advanced level moving and shooting class, I hit myself in the face with my knife that's on the front of my plate carrier. When I was taking
Oh,
my plate carrier off, I hit
yeah.
myself in the face with the hilt of my knife. And so
That'll do it. And
yeah.
I just realized right now. So as I'm preparing for this class, I went looking for my belt. And I cannot find my battle belt.
That's a problem.
It is a problem. And the reason it's the biggest problem is because I just realized that my Viking Tactics Patriot knife, which is my absolute favorite, was on it. Everything else, I think, was empty. I don't think there were any mags in it. It did have a full IFAK, but I don't think there was anything else. Like I don't think the holster was attached to it, but that knife was. And
Well,
I'm
as it
just
pertains to this conversation, the knife that I sold last year for $10,000 for many, many, many years, up until somebody offered me $10,000 for it, it was on the back of my battle belt, and I wore it to the range, and I wore it shooting, and I wore it around, and like didn't give a shit. And then some guy was like, "Hey, I'll give you $10,000 for that knife," and I was like, "Oh, well, let me go take it off of my battle belt and sell it to you."
yeah, yeah. Now,
So
so now I'm even more upset that I lost it. At first, I just figured I lost my battle belt and I'd build another one, no big deal. But
yeah,
now that knife is missing. Damn. I'll tell you, man, there are great knives to carry. There are great knives, iconic knives from movies. And which, when we talk about movies, it kind of brings us to our show today. And you go back to some of those iconic movie knives, right? And then we'll kind of move on. But the Rambo knife,
the
the
Rambo
first Rambo
knife,
knife,
the
Rambo
Predator
1, 2, and 3,
knife.
the
Yep.
Predator knife, which is the one that Billy had.
Billy.
Yeah, Billy. Yeah.
What's got Billy so spooked?
Yeah, exactly.
And like, so yeah, like each of the Rambos had their own knife, Rambo 1, 2, and 3. And even I think the later
oh yeah,
Rambo movie
yeah,
where he
yep,
was in
he did.
Burma, like that one even had one.
Yep.
And then yeah, Predator had like the knife that Billy had. And I remember they, like, it was only in the movie for like 2 seconds, but like Terminator 2 had its own knife. And what But there was a knife designer like back in the 80s and 90s named Gil Hibben, and like he designed like all of those knives that became so iconic in all these
Yeah.
movies that we love.
Yeah. And there's definitely some really, really good ones, from those movies. And movies are funny. I guess in when we talk about it in our world, I'm going to use that term loosely. The topic of today's show is one that Jamie brought to me, and I thought it was a pretty awesome one, which is why we're doing it. Is the best and worst movie gunfights, and can you actually learn something from those movies? And
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
no, and what I was going to say is, disclaimer, like they're movies, right? And you're not one guy taking on 200. You're not winning anything. There doesn't matter what kind of tactics are. We understand that they're movies, and it's Hollywood, but I think there is something to be taken away from some of the ones that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I didn't want to just run down like a top 10 list of the top 10 best movie gunfights or whatever, like because when
Right.
and actually I think when we first started talking about this, I actually kind of think that's what we were thinking. But as I started to prepare notes and actually I'm a super duper duper movie nerd. There was like in preparation for this, I went back and watched one movie, but the rest of this is like all like honestly, promise to God, like is off the top of my head because I'm Rain Man when it comes to a lot of this stuff. But when I actually started thinking about it, like yes, it's a movie, and yes, that's make believe. Some of these things and some of the ones we're going to talk about are based on real people and real things that happen in the real world and real events, historical events and things like that.
Right.
But actors are actors. Like this is kind of the thing. I was on another podcast a few months ago where they were asking my opinion on the Alec Baldwin thing, where Alec Baldwin, accidentally, killed that woman. And
Right.
my stance on that, and this is going to anger a lot of people, it's not Alec Baldwin's fault. I don't care what anybody says. Right now, as we have this conversation, there is an actor with a gun in his hand, pointing the gun at somebody and pulling the trigger. Like it's an actor's job to be an actor. So when we look at these movies, like these movie gunfights, the ones that actually turned out really good, you have to remember, like, this is an actor that probably knows nothing about guns, nothing about shooting, nothing about the military, nothing about tactics, but somebody trained them well enough that it like actually comes across through the movie. And so like I think that's an important takeaway for anybody out there, that like, I can take Leonardo DiCaprio, who probably, knows nothing about any of this stuff, and I can make him a pretty convincing former SAS soldier that can actually come through as authentic on screen. So what does that mean for you? You can go get some training from a legit person, and you can learn how to actually do this kind of stuff. And,
Right. Right. And actors are trained to be a sponge, right? I mean, you have actors that speak another language in a movie. Well, they're taught that language. And I'm going to go back and kind of get a little nerdy scientific on you, but like, gosh, I can't think of the actor's name. Michael, he played Worf on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I remember watching, it's Michael something. His last name starts with a D. I remember watching a special on it where like he had to learn Klingon. So first a language is created, and then you need to learn the make-believe language. So actors are trained sponges. They absorb the knowledge that they're given to them for each role. And you can tell ones in these movies that we talk about when they do firearms tactics and training, some of them absorb it. Some of them just play their role, and they may develop their characters' emotional, boundaries more than their tactical boundaries. I don't know, but you can tell certain actors either they're, and let's just back this up a second. Some of these actors can be just like you and just like me, where they've grown up with firearms, carried firearms, and now they get to play this role And maybe those are the people but there are people out there that are like that. We don't have to get into the Alec Baldwin thing, but if he had any training knowledge, should he have not checked that firearm? Shouldn't he have checked that firearm first? Treat every firearm as it's loaded. I mean, to an extent, I know where you're going to go with it, but to an extent, like he could have.
Yep.
There's that one video of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, and they're kind of around a prop table, and one of the guys is picking up the prop gun, and he starts to point at it, and Will Smith smacks the gun away.
Yep, snatches it out of his hand, I think, actually, and then checks it and puts it down.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, whatever you think about that whole situation, whatever you think about Alec Baldwin as a person, it is what it is. But
the best argument I've ever heard about that is if that was a scene where Alec Baldwin, as an actor, was to act out a suicide and he was going to point the gun at his own head and pull the trigger, would he have checked it? And then only he knows that answer. But
yeah, but so take away. And the other thing I want to point out here is that it's hard for me to watch movies these days with firearms handling and tactics, because I think there's a larger percentage of them that are horrible.
Yeah.
Than there are ones that are actually looks like they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And like a couple things, like you as a person, whoever's listening, you can't watch a movie, even the ones that we point out and go, oh, this was right and they did this really well. You can't watch a movie and then think you know what you're doing, and because they showed it in this movie and this character in this movie did this thing, that it's doable and that I can go do it. Like, but some of these things,
disclaimer, like,
yeah, but I mean, some of these things are valid and grounded in reality and grounded in actual tactics and stuff like that. And I mean, a good example is like Steven Seagal. Like Steven Seagal as a person is actually a good shooter. The way he shoots is stupid in my opinion, but he knows how to align sights and press a trigger and shoot pretty well. But the way he shoots in movies and stuff, and actually the way he shoots in real life, I would never recommend that to anybody. But I always tell people there's two different types of shooters. There are people that are shooters and there are people that shoot guns off. And way back in the day, all of us started out as people who shoot guns off. Right. And then if you take training and actually make it a point to try to master your craft, you can then become a shooter. And I always say, like, I transitioned from guy who shoots guns off to shooter when I first got stationed at SEAL Team 3 back in the year 2000, and started shooting with those guys. Like, that's when I really became a shooter. Prior to that, I was guy who shoots guns off. And I was also guy who likes movies a lot. And like Steven Seagal, like, Under Siege, Out for Justice, Marked for Death. Like, I love all of those movies. They're all terrible, but I love them. But as guy who shoots guns off that like saw something in a movie, like one thing that Steven Seagal, like, at least in my mind, is kind of famous for in movies with guns, like Steven Seagal always press checks his guns. And I'm going to tell you and be straight up honest, that's where I learned how to do a press check. And that's kind of where I picked up originally the importance of doing a press check, was from watching Steven Seagal do it in all his movies. Like,
yeah.
So,
yeah. And I mean, when he first made movies, obviously this was during the 90s, and 90s action movies were hip firing. I'll never forget the Von Damme movie Double Team. I mean, hip firing, full on kip ups, like, jumping onto the hood of the car to shoot. Like, I mean, it was all that. But it was, and then horrible quips, after you do something stupid. So, watching movies back then when you were none the wiser was probably great. But as you become more involved and you start to see this stuff and you're like, oh God, I mean, I can guarantee anybody listening to this, watching this, whatever, when the movie Wanted came out, they thought you could probably curve a bullet. Like, I guarantee there were probably people out there this was their first, and they were like, no way, you can curve a bullet. Thankfully, there was probably not a range that when they saw them pull that gun back, they shut that down. But my God, like, and it's funny because when like there's a scene in that movie that somebody rated as like one of the best or coolest gunfight scenes, and it's at the end when he's just like running full bore, catching guns as guys are falling, and like I'm like, no, it was not good, not at all. Like,
Well, so that there though, you have run across a point that I wanted to make. Like there, like because amongst the small handful of things that I'm an extreme nerd about, I love shooting and I'm a good shooter and all that, but I really do nerd out just like on guns themselves as
oh yeah,
these precision machines and one might could even go so far as to say works of art in some cases. I love guns. I like even if like shooting is a completely separate thing, but I do love guns. And so there are some movies that are great gun movies. Like The Matrix is a great gun movie, but there's nothing to glean tactically from The Matrix. And 3,000 Miles from Graceland, I love that movie and I
great,
love all the guns in that movie, but there's
yeah,
nothing to be taken away from that. There's no lessons to be learned
yeah,
about the
and
authenticity of gunfighting.
right, and any movie that has the hero, the villain, the whoever hanging upside down, spinning with fully automatic submachine guns. Like I just watched Punisher Warzone. Now, the so gosh, he just died. The actor, Ray Stevens. Um, he was a great fit in that movie, and there is definitely a scene when the villain was horrible and whatnot, but there was some tactics. We'll just use it. We'll call it what it is, right? Firearms tactics that was in that movie that was I enjoyed watching back then. Um, but like there was some awesome guns in that movie as far as a gun movie, and it
Yeah.
was, but you, you're not shooting a 5.56 and blowing somebody's leg off.
Yeah, so like cool gun movies are completely separate than what we're talking about today.
Exactly.
In movies that you actually that like, in my opinion, like actually got things really correct and that things that you could actually learn from in these like really good authentic movie gunfights. So.
All right. So where would you start us off?
I have everything kind of categorized into like just kind of like famous epic movie gunfights, and then like that I have like a little subsection in my brain for like Western movies and gunfights, and even things that can be learned from that, like um, the marksmanship that's shown in Quigley Down Under is like totally legitimate in my opinion. You would have to be extremely talented to do what he did in the movie, but I do think what he did in the movie is doable, and pretty much like the stuff that they show in that movie is not really all that far fetched if you were a dude like him that had devoted your life to honing this skill and stuff like that. And like, the scene in Unforgiven where they're in close quarters and like everybody starts pulling their guns and shooting at each other and missing, and William Money pulls out his gun and very calmly just goes bang, 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 and takes everybody out as there's like bullets flying all around him. And like that's something that rings very true to me based on my experience as an instructor. Like everybody, I think a lot of students show up to class like thinking they're gonna show me how awesome they are from Jump Street, and then and they can barely hit a target at 5 yards. Like
Right.
so you put real world life and death stress on that. We're just at a range and I'm holding a timer, but you put actual life and death, fight or flight, adrenaline stress response on top of that, and like what happened in Unforgiven is definitely a big takeaway in even for modern gunfighting. Like
Right.
so like obviously, so anybody watching can see the shirt I'm wearing. So
There it
I
is.
guess I would start there with Heat. Um,
Was that Kilmer's mask?
they
Or was that
all
Michael
of them.
Madsen's? Yeah, no, I know, but there one were white, one were black. Um,
Oh no, so I
Margot
think this one is actually De Niro.
De Niro. Okay, got it.
Pictured
All
on
right.
the t-shirt. But so I I have a soft spot in my heart in general, just as a movie fan and as a fan of guns and a fan of shooting and a fan of directors that actually take the time to be authentic. I've actually been offered a job. I had to turn it down because of stuff that I had going on in the Navy, but I was actually offered a job to be a tactical advisor on a movie a couple of years ago, and I think the saying that opportunity only knocks once. I think that was my one time that opportunity was going to knock for that, and I was kind of forced to turn it down, and I'm afraid that opportunity is never going to come knocking ever again. But the movie Army of the Dead, I would have been a tactical advisor on that movie, so what I was told by other people that work in the industry is you're hired to be a tactical advisor. You're hired because you know about guns, you know about tactics, you know about these things. And so you're hired to try to make the movie more authentic. But I've heard from other people in the industry that do that job that once the cameras start rolling, there are a lot of directors that once the cameras are rolling, don't care anymore. So when you see Mel Gibson do something stupid with a gun and you go, hey, wait, let's cut that. What he just did right there is not
right.
He did that wrong. You'll get fired because
Yeah.
the at the end of the day, the director is trying to make a movie. So Michael Mann is a person in Hollywood that has had a long-standing relationship going all the way back to the Miami Vice television show, which we talked about in the last podcast. I think it was the last one. Michael Mann's reputation is that, and same thing with like Christopher Nolan, they go way out of their way to make sure they're as authentic as possible. So before we get into Heat, Michael Mann made a movie in 1981 starring James Caan called Thief. And like now we take for granted because of, John Wick and The Matrix, and I mean, just on and on and on and on, people reloading a handgun, dropping mag, slapping it in a new mag, rack the slide, continue shooting. That's something that's very, very common right now. But that movie Thief in 1981 by Michael Mann, that was the very first on-screen reload of a semi-automatic handgun. And if you think about it, like there were scenes in movies prior to that where they were like, oh, we're getting ready to go into this fight, we better load our guns, and they do like an initial load where they just kind of slap the magazine in, and then most other movies and TV shows, when they needed to reload the gun, they would kind of cut away and then cut back, and now our star has more bullets in his gun again. But Thief in 1981 was the first on-screen reload of a semi-automatic handgun. James Caan had a 1911. He shoots, runs empty, does a full combat, what we refer to now as a combat reload on screen. That was the first instance of that. That was with Michael Mann. And then we get to Heat, and the famous bank robbery shootout scene in Heat, and Val Kilmer does the very first start to finish on-screen reload of an AR platform. Like he's shooting an M4 basically. Start to finish on-screen reload of an M4, and he does it absolutely correctly, 100% correctly. They show that clip to Marines at the Marine Corps School of Infantry on how to properly reload your M16, M4, because Val Kilmer was trained and he did it exactly right on camera, start to finish, conducts a combat reload of his M4 perfectly. And so for Heat, for Collateral, and Miami Vice, Michael Mann used the same trainer in all of those movies. Miami Vice, the movie, I should point out. He's a former SAS operator named Mick Gould, and he trained all the actors for Heat, which again now, like that famous gunfight in Heat is great for cover and move, for shoot, move, communicate. They move. They do bounding cover and moving. They actually do select hard cover to hard cover. They're communicating the whole time. When one person is reloading, the others like increase their volume of fire to make up for the lull created by the person that's reloading. I mean, that whole scene.
Talking guns.
Yep, talking guns, cover and move, just their gun handling. They're moving at high port when they're moving. Their immediate action as soon as they took contact from the LAPD, their immediate act, we always say, like the first 10 seconds of contact, you should attempt to overwhelm your enemy with a volume of fire. So if I'm patrolling through downtown Kandahar, I take contact from the left. I'm going to call contact left. Everybody gets online, and we're going to attempt to overwhelm that enemy force within the first 10 seconds of the gunfight with our volume of fire. That's basically what they did in Heat. Then they break into attempting to break contact. They use cover and move. They call it out when they're loading. The other shooters increase their volume of fire to cover for the person that's loading. And again, Val Kilmer does his combat reload perfectly on that gun. All good things. Like there's tons of good takeaways from Heat. From Heat, like moving into Collateral, again, same trainer. That was so out of all the movies that Tom Cruise has ever done where his character has to have a gun or shoot a gun or use a gun, whatever. When Mick Gould, same guy, trained Tom Cruise for Collateral, that was the first time Tom Cruise had ever actually fired live bullets out of a real gun in training for a movie, because that SAS guy, Mick Gould, like made him go to the range and made him draw his pistol from a holster and, shoot from the hip, punch it, and then press out like what I teach, exactly what I teach. It's funny when people at high levels all basically end up all teaching the same stuff, but funny how that happens. But actually making Tom Cruise, learn how to shoot with a real gun at the range, pulling a gun, shooting gun, punching holes in a target, and actually seeing where the bullets hit, conducting reloads, grip, stance, sight alignment, all that kind of stuff. And in Collateral, one of my favorite, sorry, a little rabbit hole here. One of my favorite things on YouTube, and I wish he would do more of it, is Larry Vickers has his like Larry Vickers channel, but then he has like a little side thing. It's Larry at the Movies, where Larry Vickers breaks down these kind of famous clips from movies. And this is one of the ones he does in Larry at the Movies. He breaks down the scene in Collateral where Tom Cruise guns down those guys that stole his briefcase. And from the time he begins his movement, draws his pistol, he fires, we call it shooting from retention. He draws his gun, clears his holster, shoots the first guy twice from retention with one hand, because he's deflecting the guy's gun with his support hand. Deflects the gun with the support hand, draws his pistol with his strong hand, clears the holster, shoots two from retention into the guy's center mass at a probably about 1.5 yards, so maybe call it 4 to 5 feet. Turns, does basically a Mozambique on the second guy, does 2 to the chest, and then as the guy's falling, shoots him in the head, comes back to the other guy, shoots him in the head. And that from the time Tom Cruise starts his movement till he fires his last shot, it's like 1.5 seconds. And like, that's legit. And like, if you watch what he does in the movie and like the technique he uses and everything, like that little scene right there is dead on. Like that, like Tom Cruise did it perfectly. He did it the way I hope I would do it.
Right.
Awesome.
But you can tell in that movie, like even the way he moves through the club, the scene in the club, like the way that he moves in that was precise. It was precise and it was deliberate. Not a lot of wasted movement there. I mean, so that was a very good movie. And, I think what happens is when you get into these movies, there are certain scenes that are amazing. And then there are obviously actors that are better at what they do. Val Kilmer in Heat was amazing. I think De Niro was good. I don't remember if Pacino looked as good as the others, or even some of the police officers didn't look as good. But I think you're going to get that with anybody, with any of those situations.
I read something that that like for Heat, all the other actors like showed up for these like range training days with the trainer, and that like De Niro, I'm sorry, not De Niro. It was Pacino that like he just like opted to like not show up. And like his backstory in the movie was that he had been, I believe, an infantry officer in the Marine Corps was like his backstory, and then he got out of the Marines and became a LAPD, detective. But again, I guess he thought he had enough experience. But like, and in that,
wow, shocker! Somebody thought they didn't need training.
But Heat's also a really cool gun movie because there's a lot of cool, unique guns in there, and like the gun that Al Pacino uses in that shootout is something that an LAPD officer would never have. But
wasn't it FAL?
It was I think it was an FNFNC. I don't think it was
Okay.
an FAL. And like Tom Sizemore's character is using a Galil, and so
Yep.
it's like
Yep.
super cool.
So, and that was kind of, I mean, that was kind of it for Heat. I mean, you know, there wasn't really a lot of other banger scenes that were stand out. I mean,
The little scene
oh,
where they go to meet at the drive-in where
oh yeah, yep,
Val Kilmer's providing like sniper overwatch and all that. I
yeah,
mean, that's
sure,
pretty decent. Like
yeah,
close quarter little shooting scene there because they're in
yeah,
vehicles.
yeah. So
This
one of
is
the
something.
ones,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
This is something I was going to bring up a little further down, but because now on social media, I don't know why, but like lately there's been this big explosion on social media of instructors like selling and pushing these like vehicle combat courses where they're like training you how to shoot from inside a vehicle, and um like there's these videos of like Chris Costa in the driver's seat and some other dude in the passenger seat, and they're like shooting past each other and over each other, and this guy ducks down and this guy goes up. Like like everything I've ever been taught in the military is when bullets start flying, get out of the vehicle, period, end of story. And they did that in Heat. They were using the vehicle to attempt to extract, and as soon as that was no longer an option, you egress the vehicle immediately. So like
Well, yeah, because
in
they were taking a lot. I mean, well, I think it was the driver got shot in
yeah,
Heat, and that's what kind of ended that vehicle run. But
yeah, but bullets start flying, egress the vehicle. Like
so,
that.
so here's one thing, and I'm going to kind of just step out of this. Here's one thing that annoys me about movies, and Dan, my guy here, brought this up. He was like, the shooting in enclosed vehicles, like of the back of a van, and somebody fires a shot, like the concussive force would have people. So, I mean, you know, in Heat, they were full auto
Yep.
in the vehicle. Like, you know, that's the Hollywood piece of it right there, right? There's no ear pro. You don't have eye pro on. It was just straight raw fire in a vehicle that's going to.
I mean, there is a manner of realism to that as well. There's something that actually happens in combat called auditory exclusion. I mean, you have entire generations of men that have been in combat, you know, World War II through Vietnam, all the way up through Desert Storm and stuff. I mean, like us as military members going into combat and wearing ear pro and eye pro is actually a relatively new thing. I mean, even as recent as when was Black Hawk Down? That was
92,
92.
93.
Yeah, yeah. Like only the tier 1 Delta guys like were wearing iPro, you know, pretty much. Like so like
Oh
your
yeah, there's that one.
average
Yeah, that one scene where the guy shoots the belt fed right next to the one guy, and he was like, you know, I can't hear anymore.
yeah. But
So
and I mean, so there's there's been generations of people in combat that were not wearing eye pro, we're not wearing ear pro, but when your body goes into like that fight or flight combat response, this thing that's an actual proven thing that happens called auditory exclusion. It's your brain basically turns your ears off because it's your brain saying you don't need this to survive right now.
yeah,
And turns your ears off. Like
one of the movies that I brought to your attention last night and kind of asked you about was Den of Thieves. And there's two scenes in particular that are I kind of went back and watched. And the first one is the opening scene, and it goes back to that point that you were talking about where they yelled contact left and immediately just unloaded on that cruiser that was coming in, and they just eliminated that whole potential threat. And they what was good about the movie was that there was that same type of communication of where the threat was next. I believe if there was, you know, loading and loading, and then the final scene, it's the, you know, the bad guys and the good guys, so the cops and the robbers, if you will, and they were stuck in traffic, and there was, I don't know, maybe 100 yards between the 2 lane, and it was a 2 lanes of just dead stop traffic.
Yep.
And the bad guys noticed the good guys, and I believe there were 5 police officers and um 4 3 I don't know, 3 or 4 robbers at and it opens up with Pablo, um Pablo Schreiber uh busting out the saw and just ripping up as the police started to advance towards the vehicle.
Yeah,
And
so that's the
immediately,
number one takeaway from that movie is if you have the means to obtain a fully automatic belt-fed weapon, I highly recommend it. Like I've always said, the one thing from movies and television that is not overrated is fully automatic weapons. One of the most disappointing days of my life was the first day I got to throw a real hand grenade.
yeah.
And it was so disappointing, but machine guns are every bit as awesome as they look on TV and movies. So
Yeah. But there was some good movement, particularly by one of the police officers, the actors that played a police officer, blonde guy. And just the way that he moved, everything was tucked up. Like he ducked into cover when taking shots, and then quickly popped out when the fire stopped. And I mean, there was a little bit of good stuff there. The worst actually was Gerard Butler's character in it. I mean, everyone else had red dots. He was shooting a scar with iron sights, and there was no actually looking through the sights.
yeah.
And those are the things that I kind of notice. So, and even like his grip, I remember taking a screenshot and putting this up, and it was funny. Like there was a moment where I think it was Chris Serino and Scott McGregor. Like we would screenshot these horrible movie grips and put them up there. And it's just, you watch that stuff and you watch it, and that's the part that gets you. So are there bad tactics being taught, or are there good tactics being taught? But so the way that scene moved, and the way that they moved from cover to or cover and concealment, and tried to advance, obviously, and the bad guys broke contact and did the same thing, but they moved while one was shooting, and then when the one shooter stopped, the other one would engage, let them reload, let them move for a different position. So
And another good takeaway from that movie and that scene is, like, I don't care what anybody says, like cars, vehicles, like mainly like passenger vehicles, are not hard cover. I mean,
no.
there are certain key places that you can get behind on a vehicle that can provide you a little bit of hard cover, but by and large, vehicles, especially passenger vehicles, are concealment at best, and really should not be relied on hard cover. Now, if you're in a situation like that, and I think that's a good takeaway, and I don't even know if they put this much thought into it, but they were in a situation where they were kind of funneled into that. And so for the beginning running part of the gunfight, they had to kind of use these vehicles as hard cover as best they could. And they even did that correctly, because they took cover at the front of the vehicle with the, in this case, the police are the bad guys. I'll let each person make their own assessment of that. But the police were approaching from the rear. The robbers were taking cover at the front of the vehicle. So if your threat is to the rear, then the best place to put yourself is at the front, because at that point you have the entire vehicle, the outer metal of the vehicle, the seats, the stuff in the dash and the engine block, and you're basically putting everything in between you and your threat, which is exactly what you should do. And then they did the other thing that you should do, which is get away from cars and try to move to a better position. So that's another good takeaway from that little scene.
And the one thing that I did notice is one of those little, like, he did when the police were moving. Here's the other thing with Heat, even with this one, I don't know if the protocol is to engage in a full-on gunfight with civilians and pedestrians around. But it was funny when they were walking by the police cars, they were telling everybody to get down, get behind the engine block. So they actually, it was cool to see that they understood that was probably the only thing that was going to help the situation.
Well,
but
and Heat and Den of Thieves, in these two specific scenes that we're talking about, I'm gonna the way I'm saying it's not really the way I mean it, but like it, that's they illustrate like why sometimes it's good to be the bad guy. Like if you're the bad guy, you don't have to worry about your background. You don't have to worry about collateral damage. You don't have to worry about if I'm going to accidentally shoot the dude in this car or not, because like I'm a criminal and my main concern is keeping myself out of jail and getting away with whatever it is I'm doing. And one of the things I hate in movies and TV, and I do think this is one of those things that permeates into reality, is and this is one of the things I try to train people out of in my classes, is like once we reach a point where we're going to use deadly force, like we're there now.
Right.
You're like Americans are in love with this thing. Like, good guys wear white hats, and we don't. It's cowardly to shoot people in the back, and like. But once we're in the space where deadly force is authorized, we're there. You don't have to be like, hey, buddy, I've got a gun, freeze.
Right.
And that's one thing that they do. Actually, they illustrate it really well in both Heat and Den of Thieves, is like, once we're there, we're there. And like so in Heat, in the famous bank robbery scene, Val Kilmer is the first one to call out the contact and make contact. And in Den of Thieves, my man with the saw, he's the first one to initiate contact, because like once we're there, and no hesitation, we're there now, and it's time to go. Like you don't have to be like, hey, cops,
right,
freeze,
yeah,
I've got a gun. It's time
exactly
to go.
Right, yeah. And so what's going to be good about this, and I guess kind of also dangerous about this, is this could literally be one of those podcasts that turns into a 4-hour podcast. And I wish that, and you know what, maybe this is part one and we come back to do it again, because what I would love to do, and I've seen other people do this, is I would love to get the clips that we're talking about for those watching on YouTube. I would love to get those clips and superimpose them on here so we can talk through the clip as it's happening. And I want to just make one other point, because I know in the beginning we said movies, but I want to change that to Hollywood, because two of the things that are on my list are TV shows, streaming, whatever. Terminal List is one of them. And I told you about this the other day. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out yet, but it's called Special Operations Lioness.
Nope.
It's a Taylor Sheridan. So it's got the, Yellowstone whole situation happening.
I'm a fan. Yep.
And it's like, I love it. Like it's really good. So I would highly recommend checking that out. But so what's your next potential? Because I know we have one that we're both enjoying. We both enjoyed it, and it's funny because it's Paul Taylor's go-to as well. So I've heard him talk about
interesting.
it. Interesting.
Like one of the points I wanted to make is like there are because another thing we could go on for hours is talking about all the like terrible things in Hollywood and the bad movies and the bad gun. But there are certain movies that like I have come to consider to be like the gold standard. And like movies like Lone Survivor, from my limited experience being in combat and being in a combat zone and being in a war, like Lone Survivor is absolutely, without a doubt, the most accurate portrayal of what it's like to be in a gunfight. Black Hawk Down, because that was based on real people and a real event. That was another one that they went way out of their way to like guarantee like as much authenticity as possible, and like the military tactics that they're using. I mean, they actually put the actors like through boot camp, as they did with Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers. So like those ones, and like,
what about 13 Hours?
13 Hours, I love it. There's like a couple of little scenes. It's actually, I mean, there's obviously the bulk of the movie is them defending their little annex, but the part where they actually push out and go to the house where the ambassador was, like their movement from their annex to the house, inside that little compound of the house of them trying to rescue Chris Stevens, and then their extraction, like that is amazing. Like that scene gives me super boner every time. Like, and it's not even a very long sequence, but there is a sequence where it's like footage from the Predator, like looking down on them. And you can see that they all have their IR strobes, and you can see the way they're moving. They're not in this sequence I'm talking about. They're not even shooting. They're just covering and moving as they move down the street, and they all have their IR strobes to identify them, which is the same thing I've got. I have two. I have one on my shoulder and one on my helmet because I do not want to get. I don't want to get shot at all, but I definitely don't want to get shot by my people.
Right.
So like that whole little sequence is phenomenal. And actually the assault part, the very end part of Zero Dark 30, I would whoever, I don't know who trained them for Zero Dark 30. That may be something that's kept quiet on purpose. But like Lone Survivor, Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, 13 Hours, and Zero Dark 30, like to me, those are like the gold standard.
Yeah.
And then like to me, I always feel like I have to say this. I do not mean any disrespect at all to Chris Kyle, but the movie American Sniper is the worst military movie ever made, in my opinion. Kelly's Heroes is more realistic than American Sniper. Chris Kyle, great dude, American Hero, great book. The movie was a pile of trash. And like, the only reason I even bring that up is because in a time where we have movies like Lone Survivor and Black Hawk Down and 13 Hours and Band of Brothers and stuff, like there's no excuse for American Sniper being as bad as it was. Like American Sniper was just terrible. Every military thing that they showed in that movie, it was absolutely terrible from top to bottom. It has the word sniper in the title, and the little sequence where Chris Kyle goes to sniper school. I've seen rednecks shooting beer cans in the backyard in North Carolina that are a more accurate portrayal of sniper school than what they show in a movie called American Sniper. It's like, it's 5 minutes of them on the firing line shooting at a paper target 26 yards away, and the instructor going, "You got to do better than that, Kyle." And then all of a sudden he's the greatest sniper ever. Like that movie is so terrible.
Yeah.
And with that, those are the movies that I kind of consider the gold standard. Like, each one of those movies could be its own podcast. One movie that I like the movie, and it's a great example of really good things and really bad things all in one. And it's kind of it's weird that they did some things so good and then they did some things like so bad. Is the movie Shooter with Mark Wahlberg?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So like, just quick example, and then we can move on to the one that you want to talk about. Like in the opening scene of Shooter, he's sniper and spotter. He's in his hide site, and I did find out that Mark Wahlberg was trained for that movie by an actual Marine Corps Scout sniper. But in the opening scene, he's up in his hide on this ridge line, and he's covering the extraction of this fire team that's like in these Humvees, and they're being pursued by these local militia forces or whatever, like in Africa. And he's 800 meters away. There's a vehicle moving right to left 800 meters away, and as the vehicle is moving right to left, it's kind of angling away from him. So like literally every single second the distance is increasing. In the movie they say there's a little bit of left to right wind, so left to right wind on a target that's moving right to left and moving away from you, increasing in distance, and he pulls off 2 perfect headshots of the driver and the gunner in a vehicle that's moving at 30 miles an hour right to left with a crosswind that's moving left to right and increasing in distance. That's completely impossible. It's right. That would not, I don't care. There is no human on earth that would be capable of that. And so that's one of those things that I think, because there is some authentic stuff in that movie, I think it's that kind of stuff that makes people think that could be possible. And I'm here to tell you, there is no human being on earth that could do that could make 2 consecutive perfect headshots under that situation. But at the same time, Shooter is also the only movie I have ever seen, and I could be wrong about this. Somebody can give us some feedback and comments if I'm wrong about this. It's the only movie I've ever seen where somebody has a malfunction and does a tap rack bang on camera. Like, the scene in Shooter where he goes and finds that Russian guy's house, the Russian sniper, and he gets the information from him, but like really it was all a trap, and these like mercenary dudes come in and surround the house, and then Mark Wahlberg has to like fight his way out. There's a quick little scene, if you blink you'll miss it. It's like 1 or 2 seconds long, but it's when he because initially he just has a sniper rifle and a pistol, and he shoots one of the mercenary guys and picks up their M4. and he's running and he's shooting on the move. He's shooting on the run, and the rifle malfunctions, and you see him tap, rack, and you see the round come out, the bad round, presumably, and then he gets back into it. And I've always wondered, did the guy who trained him for that role train him so well that he did the tap rack bang on his own and they just happened to catch it on camera, or was it scripted for him to do a tap rack bang? Either way, it's awesome. It's the only movie I've ever actually seen them have a malfunction and do a tap rack bang and clear it. But in that movie, there's also a bunch of other stuff that's completely unrealistic.
Oh yeah, so. I mean it is, and like I said, I think I'm gonna make the call right now that this is definitely going to be a part one, because we can go back to some of these, because there were a lot of pieces, and I do want to touch on this last movie, because of how we talked about it. But there was even at the end when here's the thing that gets me about these Hollywood movies, and I think that there's nothing they can really do about it, but when they give you the perspective through the reticle. I mean, the reticles don't look like that. Like the reticle that he had on that thing, it was like, he could see the guy's spots on his fingernail. I was like,
wait a minute. So you're telling me that the reticle he had in the movie Navy SEALs, where he could see the thermal people through the wall, you're telling me that's not real?
God here. Switching to thermal. That was so
They're not
bad.
Moving. You're clear.
Oh God, Bill Paxton. All right, so that brings us. This is going to be the wrap up of today's show, part one. But I do want to talk about one of probably the more obscure films, but is one of my top 10 movies of all times. Two actors that, I mean, not really big name. Ryan Phillippe, Benicio del Toro, The Way of the Gun. It has always been one of my favorites. And then when you showed me your list, I was like, oh, I'm really happy that you put that on there. First of all, if you haven't seen the movie, go watch the movie. If the opening scene doesn't do it for you, turn it off.
Sarah Silverman gets punched in the face in the first 10 seconds of the movie.
Yes. The whole opening scene where the two of them are just there and she's going off, and Ryan Phillippe's comeback is still something that resonates, and that we it's just hilarious. It is brutal, but it is awesome. So if it doesn't do it for you, you may want to turn it off. But the first scene that just really seals it is, and wait a minute, should we talk about the scenes? I mean, are we going to ruin it for people?
I think we can talk about it in generalities without giving away like the plot points.
Okay.
But like one of the first points I'll make is going back to my original point, is these people are actors who have no tactical experience of their own, and probably little to no firearms experience of their own. It was I believe is the director of this movie's brother was a Navy SEAL, and he trained Ryan Phillippe and Benicio del Toro in this role, and a lot of that authenticity really comes through. And
just the way
training.
And again, this is because this one could be at least 30 minutes of just dissecting some of these scenes. So we're going to do this abridged, and then we are going to come back for a second, because there's points, like I want to talk about Extraction 1 and 2. I want to kind of go into Black Hawk Down a little bit more.
Yep.
And then even this Lioness, the Special Operations Lioness, like if you could get caught up on that, I want you to take a look at some of those things. But just some highlights from the movie, or from The Way of the Gun. The first scene where they're involved with using firearms is so clutch, because it's the whole, they made a plan, they executed that plan, the plan went off the rails, and they kind of threw away the plan. And I think that's very evident in the way that it all went down.
And it's also evident that these two guys have worked together and fought together and trained together so much that, like, when their plan goes out the window, it really doesn't even matter all that much, because they know exactly what the other person is going to do, and they know exactly how to shoot, move, and communicate with each other.
Right. And they got out of that situation and without incident. Well, not without incident, but they were able to get through that. So that scene is kind of what did it for me. Just the way that they moved and communicated through there, and then the way that they escaped was like, at the first time I was watching, I was like, "What the hell are they doing?" Like that, the car thing, awesome. There wasn't a real secondary. Well, the scene at the motel, but again,
to me that's the best. That's the best to me. Like that illustrates, and again, it was
wait,
like
which motel?
I'm talking at the end.
Yes, but remember there was the one in between when they took off with the long guns. But yes, so the end scene
for two-man room clearing, like it's you can really almost find nothing wrong with it. They did that really well. They it illustrates one of the points that I always like to make, that a shotgun is a great weapon for a short gun fight, but not a good weapon for a long gun fight.
Right. Yeah.
But two-man room clearing, shoot, move, and communicate. Like that final scene is really a shining example of the right way to do that, and why you should look where you're jumping before you jump behind cover.
Yeah, that scene still gets me. But some of the reloads, I remember Benicio del Toro doing that reload. I think he had it behind like the crook of his knee, or no, he had it between his legs because he was I don't know if it was support hand or whatever. One of his hands was out of the fight, and they executed reloads great. Even with the shotgun reload, I mean, it was just, it was awesome. I guess the only thing is, you wonder why they did this. They went through all of that, and everyone that they had going up against them with the revolvers, like, oh no, some of them had revolvers. I think there was a 1911 that was being used there. I'm talking about the old guys.
Yeah, and
James Caan.
There's probably some people listening to this right now that still think a revolver is the way to go, or a 1911 is the way to go. And
so one of the key lines to that in that movie for me, I loved it. It was when the two exec protect guys were in custody, and James Caan comes in, and he was like, and the one guy's just starting to just throw shade at him, and he was like, he says something like, "Listen, son, there's one thing you can be sure of an old guy who doesn't carry a gun. He's a survivor." And I was just like, "Oh, that's nice. I like that. I'm going to get when I'm older, but I carry a gun, so I guess it doesn't work." But unfortunately, like I said, I'm pressed for time today, and we have we burn through an hour and 10 minutes like it's 35 seconds sometimes. And I know we haven't even gotten through all of the list. So this was not supposed to initially be a part one, but now this is part one. And part two.
It's one thing to nerd out on movies, but I really feel like there's some valuable content here. Like there's some valuable takeaways from this stuff that warrants being talked about. So yeah, let's definitely put a pin in this.
Right. So what I want to say is part two is going to be the movies that we've discussed and the tactics that can be taken away from that.
Yeah.
Right. So we will come back to this and break down this scene, and maybe I will figure out how to do it. I know it's not going to work for the Spotify and the Apple podcast, but maybe we will do it. But we're going to break down the scene in The Way of the Gun that we're talking about, the first and the second. Break down the scene in one of the scenes in Black Hawk Down. Again, I don't know. I mean, I know that you said those are the gold standard of it, but I think it's easy to determine that. But Heat, I think Heat is a great one to really break down, because
the gold standard, I was specifically referring to military.
Military. Okay, got it. Okay, all right. So
for military authenticity, those are the gold standard. Yeah, but yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So part one wrap up. Basically, we put out a couple of movies out there, and again, there's going to be two more three. Well, no, I only really got to one on my list, but two of the movies that are kind of hot right now is Extraction 1 and 2. you said the tactics advisor, military advisor. I'm not sure, but he's a friend of mine. I just went and took a class with him. He is one of the AIs for Viking Tactics. He was obviously, he was on the team with Kyle, so he got to do some of that stuff. So that's why a lot of that stuff is kind of, a little bit more realistic. There's a movie, I don't know if you've ever seen Peppermint with Jennifer Gardner.
No, I actually, it's either on my iTunes or Netflix or one of those. It keeps recommending it. It's like recommended for you, and I haven't watched it.
Check it out. Check it out, and specifically the scene where she goes to the house to take care of business. And the last one, like I said, is the Terminal List. There's a couple of scenes in there that are pretty cool. And then that last one is Linus.
Well, if we're leaving with homework, the ones I wanted, like, we can talk a little bit more about The Way of the Gun. So if you're a fan of this podcast and you plan to listen to the next one, if you haven't seen Way of the Gun, watch it. There's some stuff I wanted to talk about in Sicario #1 specifically. The Sicario movies have some really good stuff, but specifically #1 has a couple of really good things. And then there's a movie that nobody has ever seen except me. I'm the one person that's liked and watched this movie. It's a movie. It's from 2010. It's called Sinners and Saints, and it is talking about a gold standard. This movie that none of you have ever seen or ever heard of, and it's Sinners and Saints, not Saints and Sinners. That's a completely separate movie that'll be disappointing to you if you're looking to watch a good gun movie. But Sinners and Saints, no joke, is my #1 top movie that I have ever seen, where all the gun handling is correct. Like everything from the way they draw their holster, from the way they move inside the house, they kind of transition from support side to strong side to support side. The way they do their reloads, it's and the trainer for that movie was Sonny Puzakis. And I mean, it's like, I told you this yesterday, like one of the things that first jumped out at me when I first saw the movie is like all the cops and stuff in the movie, because it's like these cops and versus like these mercenary dudes, like they all have like Blade Tech holsters and stuff, and I'm like, whoa, that didn't come out of the back of somebody's used up prop truck. Like, somebody who knew what they were doing put this movie together. So if you haven't seen that movie, and I know you haven't, Sinners and Saints from 2010 is a great one. Sicario, Way of the Gun, and then we'll come back to all this.
Awesome. All right. Well, these hours go by fast, and until next time, we'll see you out there, and stay safe
and get to the chopper.
All right. See ya.